I want to introduce you to our next speaker. Unfortunately, our planned speaker, Albert Vidal, couldn't come. And so at the last minute, we are very happy to have a super sub in Xavier de Paz. Xavier is a veterinarian. He qualified from the Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona. And he has been a practitioner, a consultant, and a veterinarian working in a large production system. And he now is the global brand manager for PRRS. And we are very much looking forward to his talk, which is PRRS resilience related to moves and activities on the farm. So Xavi, your stage is ready.
Thank you, Oliver. You can hear me well there? Yes? Good. So as Oliver said, I'm a veterinarian. I'm a pig veterinarian, actually, because ever since I graduated 15 years ago, I've always been working with pigs in different pig practices and production companies in Spain and in the US. And as you can imagine, like all of you, during this time, I've been seeing and visiting farms of all types in all locations and with different types of production systems, different types of isolation and risks, as we saw this morning, farrow to finish farms, only breeding sow farms, winter finish, all types of farms, like many of you here. And all these different farms, they have one particular thing in common. They were, are, or will be infected by PRRS. Unfortunately, I was not good enough or lucky enough to be able to come here and say that I was successful in keeping a farm PRRS-naive for extended number of time. Yesterday I heard that someone was quoting Scott D, that he says that there are two types of farms, the ones that are infected with PRRS and the ones that will be infected with PRRS. I don't want to be that negative, but in my case, that's probably my experience. When I see a farm, when I visit a farm and there is a PRRS outbreak, recent, usually the frustration is there, and we start thinking about what's the goal. So what is the expectation I have now? So yeah, we have heard about that before. Maybe stabilize the farm, eliminate, and that's really some of the discussions that we have at the farm level with the production and health managers. I took this slide from Dale Paulson. I adapted it because I think it's a good way of trying to really lead this discussion. So how do I set my long-term expectations or goals? And I'd like to link a lot with what we just saw this morning. So we heard and we saw a lot of external risks. So of course, if my external risks are high, but I'm lucky enough or good enough to have low internal risks or internal cofactors, probably that should be a guide. I could not aim for elimination, probably. I can aim for stability. And then I can have then different levels of expected success and probability of sustained success. So probably in the long run, I will unfortunately have another outbreak. Well, if both my external and internal risks are high, well, we know that. It's probably, I shouldn't aim at elimination, probably. I should stay in stabilization, and the probability of success will be quite low. On the other side, if we have low external risk, so we have a good isolation farm with a good source of incoming animals, etc., everything that we can check with what Johannes Dahl and Pejo explained, well, we could first stabilize, but then aim for long-term elimination of PRRS in our farm. And definitely there we have higher chances of success. So it's very obvious, but it's good to use this to lead some of the conversations when we have to deal with panic, which is what happens when PRRS is coming. But I'm talking about expectations or goals, but there is something more urgent. What are my priorities? I have PRRS now. What should I be doing at this moment? And linking with with the topic, the resilience. Well, I want to recover fast. So I want to recover flow in my farm as soon as possible. And I would like to extend the time between breaks as much as possible. So these would be the two main focuses or the priorities that I want to have when I have these outbreaks in the farm. How do I define, or how do we define recover from an outbreak? There is a qualitative statement that we talk a lot, stabilization. So we want to stabilize, and this is a qualitative parameter. That means I'm going to win negative piglets from my farm, negative, PCR negative, not serological negative, but PCR negative piglets for a sustained number of weeks. There are some papers that talk about TTNP, which is time to negative production, but it's basically stabilization. The other factor is a quantitative one, and we are all here actually more focused on that one. So how do I recover my productivity soon? So the term uses time to baseline production. And to illustrate that, I'm going to use some graphs from Linares in the US who worked on that. But basically, what we see here is the gray line. It would be the baseline or the expected production of win piglets per week. So of course, we have an outbreak, we decline, we have reduction of win pigs, and then for some time we start doing our load close expose or close homogenize, call it whatever you want, and then we recover over time. At some point of time, we will reach the level that we had before the outbreak. Fortunately, it will come sooner than later. All this red, well, yellow and red area actually is the total loss. So it's in terms of, they call it area under the curve. We could actually add all the number of piglets that we have been losing all this time. But all this period, it's what we call the time to baseline production. And usually, a few weeks later, we will have stabilization. So not only will we reach stable production, but then also negative peak production. Regarding the increasing time between outbreaks, of course, there are a lot of factors, but I also like to focus on what I think are the most critical ones. One is enhanced immunity. We saw that last year in different presentations. That's basically, we achieved that by good management, so good quarantine and adaptation period, and the right use of vaccines. And the second aspect is biosecurity. And actually, I'm going to focus the rest of my presentation explaining some of my experiences on this aspect, how we identify and try to improve internal behaviors that may be affecting the time between an outbreak and the rest, and the next one. We see external biosecurity, and I just use this as an image. I'm not going to go deep on that, but that's something that's very classical. So we see a shower, a changing room, and we have the barrier, and then we enter into the farm. But how do we see a farm? And there are a lot of ways of looking at the farm, and actually this would not be the typical veterinarian way of looking at the farm. This would be the engineering way of looking at the farm. So you have a plan, it's a blueprint, and they say, this is the farm, and here I'm going to have the crates, the farrowing crates, gestation, etc. It doesn't happen. This is not the real world. This is just a plan laid out by an engineer. And this is what I'm going to be talking now. So I will focus on 4 areas. First, what different areas of production we have in a farm? Can we do something about it? Can we separate them or at least make people aware of the issues that this entails? The loading docks, so how are pigs being transported in and out of the farm? How we dispose the dead animals. And I know this would be referred also to external biosecurity, but there is a lot internally that we can do to also affect that. And some ideas and tips of training and awareness that have been working in other farms. We see that now, thanks to Google Earth, we can look at farms in a different way, way different than the one we saw before with the engineering plan. So this is a farm of a customer here. So as you can see, it's not a farm that you would lay out in a perfect plan. It's a farm that in the last 15 years grew from 500 sows in a farrow to finish to 2,100 sows, and then they have some of the pigs going out, and they have their own development of the gills. So of course they have been growing over time, right next to a town, which is this, and right next to 2 farms, also pig farms, which are not owned by the same system. So of course here we start having a problem. And then it's when we sit down with the people in the farm and say, okay, how can we improve some of the things that are our own responsibility? So this is a closer look of the farm. And the first thing we did is, okay, let's separate the different areas. So yeah, we know this is the town. So this is more or less how it looks like. So we have some of the pigs are, well, here's the breeding and gestation barns, farrowing barns, the nursery, these are new buildings. And then some of the pigs are finished in the farm, but just very few, the rest are going. But we could call it like at least semi-farrow to finish, because actually we are keeping gills produced in the same farm. So already this is a challenge. It's a PRRS-positive farm. How are we going to manage this here? Well, we have these different colors, and I think this is not something you haven't seen before. I'm sure that some of you even are using it. But I don't know if it happened to you, but in this farm we had different colors of coveralls. And then I asked, so what is the red, what is the blue coverall for? Oh, this is for the farm employees. Okay, and what's the green one? Oh, that's for the vet. Okay, and the white one, that's for the visitors. I said, okay. So why don't we use the same overalls and just use them in different areas of the farms? So that way we are not going to be mixing people, because definitely we can identify with the name tags who's a visitor, who's a farm staff, but could we make a good use of that? So we started doing it. And I know in some farms it's difficult it's quite complex to manage that, but maybe there's an even easier solution, and we saw that Johannes explained that the boards, they are changing that in some of the farms. That's pretty easy to have different color boards also in different areas. And that's a trick from the US, how we can implement that in an easy and practical way. We could just set up some benches in different areas of the farm that are like physical barriers that people can then see that they just have to change the shoes or the boots or whatever they're wearing. The second aspect, and it kept me really worried for a long time, because I was working for a farm many years ago, and actually it was a perfect farm, but actually we had a PRRS outbreak, and we discovered it was because of a bad management of the loading dock. So everything was perfect except for that thing. And we always know the design of the loading dock should allow the pigs to go out easily and maybe not return back. So that's something that most of us could agree on. But we are not always keeping people, preventing people from going out and in again. And believe it or not, last Friday, so I don't know if you see the date, but that was last Friday. I was preparing the presentation, and I got an email. And it's from Pork Avenue Training. The subject is, don't load and unload disease with your transported pigs. I thought, oh, this is what I need. Really, this is what I want to talk about. And actually, it was whole training on loading and unloading. So that's the concept I want to enforce here. That it's very important to give the importance, to give the right weight to this factor. I'm going to show you some examples of I would say, loading docks that maybe don't look very fancy, but I think some of them are quite useful in preventing the problems we're seeing. This one is not a good example, in my opinion, because it allows pigs to come from this area or this area into here. Then for them, it's hard to go back out because the door is narrower than the area they have here. But there is no way of preventing the farmer to come here, even walk into the loading, into the truck, and then come back. For example, this is a poor picture, but I think you'll get the idea. This is a loading chute here. This is a little gate for the pigs to go out. There is a fence. So of course, still, if I'm really motivated to break the biosecurity laws, I can just go under and then jump into the truck. But of course, we're not fighting against people not willing to do things. We're just fighting against people forgetting or just missing some of the basic concepts. The same in this case, it's very similar. So also we have the loading dock and the little door for the pigs, but there is a fence back here, or even this case, this was a, so we see the farmer here, we see this door, and then we see how the gate is open, it goes directly into or out of the farm. So in theory, there shouldn't be any communication of at least the floor of the truck driver and the farm staff. The dead box. I mean, and that's obvious. I mean, we know we have to put the dead box, if we are having a collecting system, of course, as far away of the farm as possible, and do not return after we have thrown away the dead pigs. This is an example from the US. What do you think is wrong with this picture? So we have a picture is not great, but here we have a sow farm. Here we have the road. Here we have the dead container. Apparently nothing is wrong. Well, there is a person in charge of taking the dead into the container, and some people in charge of getting the semen to go and do the inseminations of that day. These are different people. They are sharing, well, a dangerous space, a hot space. So, and this is a very easy one to solve. I think this is just being aware of what is going on. And to me, and we talked about that, and Oliver talked about this also in his presentation, and we expect this afternoon to have a lot of shared experiences. And we think that training and awareness is key in this, because the human factor is critical. So I want just to show some examples of biosecurity quizzes that we used in the past. And so it's good because that allows people to have some discussion, not warm discussions, but interesting discussions. So for example, we show this picture. So let's find 3 positives and 3 negatives about external biosecurity in this nursery barn. So just by having this, people start focusing even on their own barn. Oh, what do I have in my barn? What don't I have? What could I improve? And that allows and also similar to the beer experience that Johannes shared. So the employees start talking about how they understand the different concepts applied to their situation. Or for example, this was a finisher that had a severe APP outbreak. Of course, lots of dead pigs. But just by looking at that, and we didn't use this picture of the people on the same farm. We don't want to have anyone embarrassed. But this was a good starter for people to talk about, what would I do if I had a case like this? Or this one. So are you able to find 3 biosecurity risks in this picture? So has someone seen dead pigs around? Yeah? So there are some dead pigs here. Actually, there is another problem. Is this in the US, and they use also like here, but they use sawdust for the transport. So there is sawdust from the truck here and also in the loading chute. There is no fence, etc. So, and here we can even start getting creative. But again, that starts some interesting conversations on how or what we understand is good biosecurity. And in terms of awareness, well, we may have a problem in one of the rooms. We may have some pigs that, I don't know, have an E. coli break here, or maybe they are actually shedding purrs, and we would like to keep it as contained as possible. Well, this is an option, or even that one. Linking back to the areas, the different colors, not only changing clothes, but having a sign. This is saying basically, it's self-explanatory, I think. You have to change to the green. Attention, you are entering to the green area of biosecurity, so that you should change clothes, change boots, and wash your hands. However, and I told you, I was going to talk about, and I talked about my personal experiences in farms. I don't think anyone here has all the solutions, and obviously I do not. And I have a lot of open questions also regarding internal moves and yeah, internal biosecurity breaches and how this affects PRRS. For example, are we having enough downtime in the rooms after washing? Maybe I'm the only one, again, but have you ever seen piglets into a nursery and the floor is still wet? And we always worry about, oh, maybe they will be cold. And it's true, they will be cold. But if it's still wet, will maybe some PRRS virus or some other pathogen still be there? And some of these decisions are made based on productivity problems because we need to move pigs out and get pigs in, etc. But maybe we are doing some trade-offs. So because of productivity problems or constraints, we are making some trade-offs in terms of health. Another one is what we saw before. We tend to think that always the problem is the quarantine, and that's probably normal, but or the problem is the fattening, or the problem is the nursery. But it's not always the same. Farms are dynamic, and sometimes the big problem is in a room, and sometimes the big problem is another one. And I don't know if we have, or we dedicate enough time to make people aware of these changes, these dynamics, because we may be always protecting from a risk area and or risk part of the farm, and in some other time it will be somewhere else. So going back to the frustration, we have the perfect plan. I think we all have perfect biosecurity protocols. Like an engineer has the perfect design of the farm, but then what happens? Oh, we have dead pigs. So then it starts falling apart. We have the container in the wrong place, or we have some loading chutes that are not the right ones. So just to finish my presentation, I said that I understand PRRS resilience basically if I can get those two objectives done, so recover soon from the outbreak and increase the time between those. And the four takeaways I can give you is that I think we need to understand the different risks that the farm has. It's not all even. It will be nice to find and create firewalls. So where can I create some barriers in the farm that can allow this identification of the areas actually be something useful? Identify and correct the risky behaviors, and this goes really back to training and awareness, so being in contact with the people and having them identify what they're doing. And of course, since we're talking about PRRS, I think we have to adapt all this to our current PRRS status. It's not the same if we have, again, an outbreak, a recent outbreak in the nursery or in the farrowing rooms. So with this, thank you very much for your attention.